Lesson 103 is more about rational equations. Now, back in Lesson 78, we learned about solving rational equations, and if you remember those, we had integer values, numerical values for our denominators, and we wanted to get rid of the fractions in the denominators, or get rid of the fractions by eliminating the denominator. And we did that by multiplying every term by the least common multiple. And then we ended up with an equation that did not have fractions, and that's just easier to work with. Now, look at practice problem A. This time we have variables in the denominator. So we still do the same steps. We want to get rid of the denominator by multiplying every term by the least common multiple of the denominators. Then we won't have fractions to deal with, and that'll just make the solution easier. I like working with problems that don't have fractions better than problems that do have fractions. So I think that's a good way to do this, is eliminate the denominators. So look at that relationship there in that equation, and we see an x and an x minus 2. Always we should put a sum like x minus 2 in parentheses and think of that as one factor. And then we have that 0 on the right side, so we just don't really worry about that right now. And look at the x and the x minus 2. That's our denominator, x times x minus 2. And so we multiply each term, just the numerator, by x times x minus 2. And we can even do the 0 because that's the multiplication rule, right? Multiply every term on both sides of the equation by the same quantity. And so we have x times x minus 2 for all of them. Now we go back and we cancel. So the x's cancel here, the x minus 2's cancel here, and then 0 times x times x minus 2 is just equal to 0. So now we can go ahead and simplify. 4 times x minus 2 is 4x times 4 and negative 2, that would be a negative 8. Minus 3 times x will just be minus 3x equals 0. Simplify on the left by adding like terms, and we have x minus 8 equals 0, and then x just equals 8. So just like we did back in lesson 78 when we had integers in our denominators, we multiply every term by the least common multiple of the denominators, and that gets rid of the denominators. Let's do another one. Look at practice problem B. We see that we have some variables in our denominator, and first though, we've got a sum and a numerator, so let's just put that in parentheses, and just to keep up with that binomial, think of that as one factor. Now we want to get a least common multiple for the denominator, and that would be 5 times t. And we multiply every term by 5 times t. We don't leave any of them out because that's the multiplication rule, the multiplicative property of equality, if you want to call it that. And that says that if we multiply every term by the same non-zero number, we don't change the equation, we just change the way it looks. So now we can go back and cancel, and we have a t over t, t over t, 5 over 5, and now we've canceled all our denominators. And so let's simplify this. 5 times t is 5t, minus 3 times 5 is minus 15, plus 7 times 5 is 35, equals 1 times t, or t. Okay, so now let's go ahead and subtract t from both sides. That would cancel on the right, and so we'd end up with, have to move over to the right here, 4t is equal to 4t minus 15 plus 35 would be a 20, and so we have 4t plus 20 equals 0. Subtract 20 from both sides, we get 4t is equal to negative 20, and so therefore t is equal to negative 5. And that's our answer. T equals negative 5. Now if we want to, we can always check our work by substituting back into the original equation. And so if we substituted negative 5 back in, we would have a negative 8 over a negative 5, which is just 8/5. plus 7 over negative 5, which is a negative 7/5, and we add those two together, we get 1/5 equals 1/5. So we did do that problem right. That's always a good idea every once in a while to check your work. Just go back and substitute your solution back into the original equation. Let's go ahead and do one more problem. 1 over a plus 3 minus 4 over 5a equals 0. So we see we have fractions there. We want to try to get rid of those by multiplying every term by the least common multiple of the denominators. And so we put a plus 3 in parentheses to think of that as one quantity, and then we see that our common denominator would be a plus 3 times 5a. We multiply every term by that. A plus 3 times 5a, a plus 3 times 5a, even the 0, just to be consistent with our multiplication rule. A plus 3 times 5a. Now we go back and cancel. A plus 3 over a plus 3 cancels. 5a over 5a cancels. And then, of course, this would cancel on the right because it's multiplied by 0. Now we go back and multiply through. 1 times 5a is 5a. And then minus 4 times a would be minus 4a. Minus 4 times 3 would be a minus 12 equals 0. Add like terms, and we have a minus 12 equals 0. A equals 12. So when you see these rational expressions, just like the ones when we had integer values in the denominators, you still get a common denominator, multiply every term by the common denominator, and then go back and cancel. That gets rid of your fractions. Solve it for the unknown value. Okay, well that's all for lesson 103.